And we are live. Hi, welcome to our webinar, Heart to Heart with Chris Davis. Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hi, how you doing, Laura?
Good. It's a nice Friday. So, hey, Chris. So I have. I'm going to ask you a question while I wait for people to log in. So my question for you is, what? So with all the people you've worked with through all the years, who have had, something they want to work on with their bird, what would be like the shortest time frame you've experienced with having like an awe moment, and the longest one, like the longest you've worked with someone, like the shortest and the longest? You know what I'm saying?
You mean as far as the birds coming around from
Yes.
a behavior?
Yes.
Gosh, I'd have to think about that because I've had so many. I always got confused when people would say, they'd say, well, they were working with behavior, but then they'd have to go back to the person's house a lot and everything, because I found that most of the time, if I was just there for 1-2 hour period, observing, talking to them, everything else, a lot of the behaviors would stop right while I was there, and they wouldn't come back because I didn't just lay the behavior on the bird. It wasn't like he's doing this wrong and we've got to stop it. Yeah. I look at the whole thing and I say, no, there's usually something, somewhat, some situations, whatever, in the environment that creates a situation where the bird is reacting to that situation. And the people don't understand that. Like often they'll think, well, the bird bites me all the time. And one of the biggest reasons for that is just that a lot of times, especially if it's at Amazon and their pupils are almost non-existent and their tails are, like that wide, they're, something's, that's the big stay away from me sign in neon. But the thing is a lot of times that can be triggered just by somebody walking into the room, the bird's least favorite person coming in, and then, or things like that. It could be so simple because people just wouldn't notice it. I think one of the things I did bring up, I think last week, was an example of where poor little African gray is just a nervous wreck that's breaking everything else. And it started in the fall. Why? Well, there was a quaking aspen outside, and at noon, the leaves had turned golden. And at noon, the light would dance off the leaves, and then the lights would bounce around in the room where the African gray was. And he'd just see all these lights bouncing all over the room. Mm-hmm. And it was like, it was making him a nervous wreck. And that stopped that. I mean, it was something that if I had just been talking to her on the phone, which I've done a lot of phone consultations, but having been in literally a couple thousand, more than 2,000 homes, then I know a lot of things that trigger. So I'll say, okay, now is it, have you noticed this, what's the time of day? What's the type of thing, and I have people look at things in the environment, the time of day. And sometimes it's where, you'll have a bird. I just worked with one recently here, just this week, and that's going to take longer because this bird, we don't know why. I think he was traumatized because there was a problem when he was flown to his new home, and he was just a baby, and he ended up at the airport, at an intervening airport for like 8 hours, and then was taken to the new home in the dark, and all this other stuff, and woke up in an entirely new place, and God knows what happened to him in baggage while they were waiting those 8 hours, because it wasn't supposed to be a layover like that. He was supposed to go into another flight, boom, and that was that. And so with this bird, even though the owner had been doing everything right, using targeting and training and all that, he's really read up on things, understanding what he's doing. He's very dedicated and he's very focused. And but what I was seeing and what I was sensing with this bird, as I looked through his history and his photographs and how he would perch himself and everything else, he didn't feel safe enough yet to come out. It's like he had a case of PTSD from whatever he'd gone through as a baby. And so the normal targeting and training like that isn't going to work on him, because that would be like having machine guns going off, around your house, and you have PTSD. So then you end up somewhere else and you're in another house. Maybe there's no machine guns for thousands of miles, but you hear a car backfire or you hear a noise and you're going to be jumpy. And so what we have to do is we have to work on the bird feeling comfortable where he is. And so, and then once he feels comfortable, he'll be open to that type of interaction of learning a new behavior or learning, you know, to be comfortable with people around. But he doesn't want to come out because he's afraid. We take the fear away, then he'll want to come out. And then you can do any of that other stuff. But, you know, we've got to make his world. And that's up to him. I don't try to force it. I do set up exercises and things, but I don't try to push it too hard. Because it has to be in his time. He's the one, the bird is the one that will tell me when he's ready for the next step. And I'm not going to know that next step until I see how he reacts to what we've set up so far for him.
Nice.
So that's an extreme long and extreme short.
No, it makes sense. The way you explain it makes perfect sense now.
Yeah.
So if you're just joining us, you're at the Heart to Heart webinar with Chris Davis, and I'm sure we're going to get some good questions here today. So if you do have a question, please use the Q&A button and not the chat feature. And also later on, we're going to, of course, we're going to do our giveaway of the new Lafeber tropical fruit pellets. So stay tuned for that. So let's see here. So yeah, just a reminder, just please use the Q&A button, not the chat feature if you do have a question. And so Chris, do you want to dive into first question now, or did you have one? What do you want to do first?
Well, I had a little example I wanted to give, because one of the things that I have found is that people like to have their birds communicate with them. And we tend to think of communication mostly being speech of some sort. But all birds have different ways of communicating, and even birds that are not verbal by nature, most of them are vocal in some way or another, but they're not verbal. They're not making up words or whatever. What I found is that a lot of times, and in fact, I've done it in the past. I mean, I think we all have, where you talk at the bird, but you're not really, you might ask it a question, but you're not waiting for an answer. You know, oh, you want a peanut today? Okay, I'll give you a peanut, you know, whatever. But what I found, and I mean, I've done it myself, like I said, but as I started observing and everything else and working with a large variety of birds, what I found is that the secret to getting your bird wanting to learn to either talk in words or maybe using body movements like a learning yes or you're learning no. And again, they can't swivel their heads like that, so that you'll get a flip usually for a no. And often I've gone into people's homes and they'll say, oh, well, Freddie doesn't understand anything. And I'll say, hey, Freddie, you're such a pretty boy. And I'll get a little like that. And I'll say, did you see that? I go, what? And I say, just went like that. And I said, Freddie, are you a pretty boy? Yes, you are a pretty boy, aren't you? And I would answer back. So my favorite story like this, I went in, my dream cockatoo is black palms. I love them. I love them. They're just so elegant, but they also have, they're not as, you know, white cockatoos. I mean, they're just like everybody's buddy and they're crazy, you know, I mean, they're fun. Let's go party. And it's like the black palms, and most of the black cockatoos are more stately and not quite as crazy. But, and there's an elegance to them that I find charming. Anyway, I was talking to a woman, she was sitting opposite me, and she had her back to a large flight where she had Jezebel, her baby palm cockatoo, beautiful. And so while we were talking, I would hear Jezebel sitting back there, and she's going, oh, and I'd smile at her. And every time she made this kind of, I'd smile. And I said, you're a good girl. Are you talking? You're being a good girl. Yeah. And so then I go back to talking to the owner and making notes and things like that, because it was a bringing up baby consultation, which is my favorite, to teach them to raise them properly. Anyway, and so this went on, you know, like I'm taking notes and we're chatting and I'm, you know, different things. And probably like an hour into this, And all this time, Jezebel, while I'm talking and the woman's talking, she's making little sounds. Finally, and I'd smile at her every time she made a sound, you know. And then I sometimes I wouldn't say anything, and I just smile at her as she was trying to talk, just doing that grumble, you know, the finally she sat there and I could tell she had this look on her face. Oh, she was so cute. She had this look on her face like, okay, she's going to give it the go now. Yeah, she's really going to try it. And she sat there and she went, uh. And I said, I love you too, Jezebel. And she jumped up and down on her cage, on her perch. She was so excited because she was trying to talk. All she said was, but I knew she was trying to say, I love you. And I said, I love you too, Jezebel. And then that's when she leaped up all happy because it was like, you got it, you know? And so that was a wonderful lesson for her owner. Often I've had people say, oh, my bird can't talk, you know, and they'll say, oh, you know, buddy, come here, or Ricky or whatever. And the bird will be in there, say, how you doing? You're such a pretty boy or whatever, you know, and it'd be, okay, Ray. I said, Ricky, is your name Ricky? And Ricky, yeah. And so what happens is that because you're interacting with them, that's the biggest reward they can have because they understand the communication. Remember, they're flock creatures. They're chattering at each other all the time. I mean, I love it. I mean, it's just like a lot of times, you know, the Amazons, they'll go out and they're right in each other's faces, just, you know, and you watch budgies and they're just talking to you know, telling secrets of the world. And they're just really, and then they go off and eat and then they come back. And so they're all talking. So if you listen, a lot of times when someone would tell me their bird's name, let's say it was Lolita, and I hear, you know, I say, did you just say Lolita? And the bird's like, and then later on you're, Lolita, yes, you're pretty, Lolita. And by enunciating more carefully, then the bird would get better and better. What's interesting is that then, because everybody, you know, like I can tell them all the things that have happened with me and my birds and my clients that have raised their birds from bringing up baby consultations in the way that you communicate with them differently. And where the bird actually understands what you're saying. And this can be a budgie. Budgies understand. It's amazing. They can make up some sentences that are crazy. And you're just going, all right, you know, this is really amazing. And the thing is that we don't reinforce when they're trying to communicate with us. And so a lot of times, all it takes is sitting there being with your bird and listening and seeing, does he use certain body movements, or does he learn, or does he try to use some sort of vocalization? Last month, I mentioned something about having a cockatiel that for thank you, he'd always say Kiko. And that was his thank you. And I'd say, you're welcome, you know. But even though he never spoke as much as the other birds, he knew that when he was speaking to me, I would stop and talk back. So he didn't have to ever yell. And you'll find that a lot of times your noisy big birds, like the macaws, Amazons, cockatoos, if you pay attention to when they're trying to communicate with you, what happens is that they learn that when you say, I can't do it right now, but I'll be back. I promise I'll be back in just a few minutes, but I have to go do something else. And then I'll sit here, you know, like instead of saying, do you want to come out? Well, I'm sorry, no, you can't come out. But and then wandering out, or just saying that, you know, if they're saying they want to come out or something like that, and just walking away, you have to communicate with whatever it is they're saying to you. So if you start noticing, and this is why last week when I was teaching about when you have a child and a banana, you don't sit there and go banana, 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 banana. You say, I'm going to put banana on your cereal. Do you want some banana? Oh, you like banana, huh? You like banana. And then he checks it out, you know, you go, oh, you don't like banana? You don't like it? Okay. And you do that birds learn the same thing, but their movements are a bit different. And I've seen things as small as a budgie and on up to the biggest macaws, where they will respond with a head nod, and usually the shake is more of a like a quick twitch with their head like they do. And so for people then to stop and acknowledge that, instead of thinking, well, yeah, you said yes. Oh, you say, oh, you said yes, you like that, or no, you don't want to come out. Okay, you don't have to come out then. And you close the cage door. And so you're saying, all right, I'm respecting what you told me. And then the bird doesn't have to scream as much because he knows you're going to communicate with him. He knows you're paying attention to his body movement. So language is not always vocal. It's often physical with birds. That's why the feathers go up and down, and tails go out and down, and wings. And a happy baby macaw, that wing flip, and a happy Amazon, that wing flip is just like, to me, it just sends me over. I just like, oh my God, when they do that, it's just like, oh. And so that's what I'd like people to understand, is that your bird speaks to you in 1,000 different ways. And you can have a bird that's not verbal at all, but you can create at least a yes and no language with him by reacting and responding to what he's saying, whether it's just him going, or you can say no, and verbally, and you say, oh, you don't like that, or you don't like me, or like say, one of my birds used to scream no when I went to put her back in the cage. No, no, no. And I said, I'm sorry, honey, I've got to put you back in. I would give her a treat, a nut or something that she had to crack and monkey around with, a jam in her mouth. I was like, okay, and then she's like, yeah, let's go back to the cage so I can eat my nut, and so she would be happy about it. But I understood. I didn't just walk away when she said no. I would tell her why she had to go back, or what it was we were doing. The biggest thing, she actually bit me once because of this. She couldn't stand if I was cooking chicken.
Yeah.
She saw the chicken as a bird, and she'd sit there yelling no. So I had to like hide chicken, like from her. And I was astounded.
Oh.
Just a regular baking chicken. She's like, no, no. And she just bit the living daylights out of me. And I was being a cannibal as far as she was concerned. And so anyway, listen with your eyes and not just with your ears. And if you pay attention, there are these subtle little things that they'll say or do. Listen for syllables and things like that, but interact with them, go back and forth, react, even if you can't do anything. And you say, people say, would you like a nut? Here's a nut. Well, if you say you like a nut, oh, you like that nut, huh? Even though the bird isn't nodding yet, you go, yeah, you'd like a nut. And if there's something he doesn't want, you go, oh, you don't want that, you don't want to. Shake your head like you would with a child. That's how a toddler learns. And the 2-year-old, no, where everything's no in capital letters when they're 2, kids. And so it's that thing. That's how they learn. But we have to interact with them, and we usually kind of blow them off. We kind of just walk by and he's chattering away, and maybe the bird's saying hi to you, and you're just in a hurry, and you're kind of like, you've got to stop and just say, hi, baby, I love you. I'm busy right now, but I love you, and then just go off and do some acknowledge.
Yeah. Kind of like having mindful interactions, because mindfulness is a very big movement right now. So it's having mindful interactions with your pets, right? Thanks. So I have a question for you from Marquetta. They say, hello, Chris. I am really interested in pet birds' behavior. And this is, here's my question. As for cuddling the parrot, example, the problem of cockatoos, there are some forbidden zones where we should not touch the birds. Is there a difference between males and females when speaking about the sexual stimulation? It's an interesting question.
Well, that's interesting, because a lot of times with the males, like I remember telling children, like when you're going into somebody's home, you don't know them, the cockatiel's like, male cockatiel's rubbing his little nether parts against somebody's knuckles or whatever. And you go, oh yeah, he's dancing. You tell the kids, and then you pull the parents aside later and say, well, he's actually sexual behavior, going to want to kind of discourage that, maybe get him involved with other stuff, or, even stepping over, or just, give him a toy and play with him like that. You'll find that the places you avoid are almost always just sort of the nether regions. On a female, they'll be stimulated a bit more, of course, by having the pressure on their back. So like if you're hugging a female like this, like my yellow neb, I do not, during breeding season, I do not hug her back. Other times of year, I just pick her up like a football, I'll just give big hugs and everything's fine. But when it's breeding season, she gets all hot and heavy, if I were to do that and keep my hand on her, because the male usually mounts on top, you see. And then, so anyway, I just say that the nether regions is what you have to watch out for. And then also, people wait too long as the sexual behavior is beginning to show itself. They'll wait too long into the activity. I think, again, I mentioned this last week or last month, but it's still valid in that one of the things I'll do if it's breeding season, I won't clutch the bird up to me here, but I will hold them and like their face against my face and then scratch their little head like that. So their body's here, the nether parts are facing away, and I'm scratching their heads. And the male will be more stimulated, of course, anything coming on the vent side, because, again, that's kind of how they fit together. And so there'll be, and I mean, the female will move her tail and all that, but I'm just saying that's why you just sort of avoid anything from the shoulders down during breeding season. And you don't want to get them to that point where they're starting to breathe heavily or whatever, because you're going to trigger an increase in their hormonal production every time you do that. And then you get into a physical reason, which is harder to take care of.
Chris, are there some species that tend to be more easily stimulated than others?
Cockatoos.
Yeah.
I say cockatoos because by nature they're cuddlers anyway. And cockatoos, it's interesting because of all the birds, they're the more touchy-feely birds too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They kind of just like touch, and even with each other, they're kind of more just like, whereas the Amazons are a bunch of like schoolboys on a bus, I mean, they'll hang out there like, but they're chattering, they're eating, they're, throwing things at each other, whatever. But they're more of that type of thing. And the cockatoos, I think this is why people, they get into things hugging them, but it's not really good, because when they're babies, they're not going to be stimulated. The problem is if that becomes the only way that they're used to interacting with you, then when they're sexually mature, the cockatoos can take off like a rocket when it comes hormonally. It just seems more than I'd say any other bird. The other ones all have their thing, but cockatoos, if you're going to say just one particular,
that would be the one.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Our next question is from, who's our next question here? Elaine. She says, is it okay to allow bird in your ringneck parakeet to feed its toys during mating season, or should I take the toys away? Some of the toys have mirrors. So.
Oh yeah. Okay. I would probably remove the mirrors for right now, as long as it doesn't make him start to like feather pick or anything like that, where he's just trying to find something to do to replace his little pals, because that can stimulate there's several problems when the bird can regurgitate on their toys. One of the problems is that it's not sanitary. You've got old food coming up, and then it's sitting, it's combined with some of the digestive juices from the crop. And then it sits there and sours all day. And there used to be a condition called sour crop. And that was where there'd be a souring in the crop. And that was something that you'd see in a lot of different things, and especially in the wild birds that came in from the wild and everything too. But you would also see it in birds that would feed their toys, and then they go back later and play with a toy or even pick the bits of food, because they're not bringing up anything from their intestines, they're bringing them up from the crop. So nothing has been ground up yet by the crop yet enough to be different from that much different from how it went in. And so there'd be little pieces of nut or little pieces of whatever, little chunks, and then they try to eat them again, and they're getting that nasty bacteria into them. I would probably I'd rotate toys out. I would take out the ones that he's feeding, and I would probably find other new toys to put in there that did not stimulate the feeding behavior right now. And it might be something as simple as just even, what's a ring neck, so he's smaller. I've even used things like clothespins, wooden ones that aren't treated or colored or anything, you know, from the hobby store. Or and because they're a little bit harder and they can kind of crunch around on them, and for his little beak you can kind of mess around with it, but then you can toss it out if it gets crummy. And I don't use the ones that have the pinchers in them or the wire in them. It's just those old-fashioned peg type that you get at the hobby store, you know, at Michael's or something, or Amazon, like 12 billion for $2 or something. But you know, giving him other little things that could occupy his time. The other thing is, often what I'll do is have people, before the bird gets into that whole thing during the day, if they get an opportunity to just bring the bird out with them, like if they're going to sit down in the morning, have a little breakfast, even if they're getting ready to leave for work or whatever, you know, they can maybe just set him up so he's on the table while they're eating their breakfast, and they're talking to him, they're drinking coffee and all that. And they can even have like a little ball, you know, all those little balls, and just roll them back and forth to him, or you know what I mean, and just talk to him while they're doing that. And he can just wander around on the table if they want, you know, just throw an old sheet on there and you can throw it in the washer later on. But the thing is that you're taking his mind away from feeding those babies, and you're giving him something outside that kind of occupies his time, but yet it can't go into a habitual thing, because you're right there. Some of the ways when I tell people to alter behaviors, sometimes, I mean, again, I like subtleties. And so a lot of times, I know the last time I had mentioned, you know, the little earthquake, but it's like a 2.0, you know, where it's, or it's just a little wiggle of the hand. It's the same way that, let's say you're sitting there with your bird, he's on the table with you, you know, you're having breakfast, coffee, and, you know, and he's kind of walking around, you have some little toys there for him or whatever. And let's say he starts to do the regurgitation thing. What you can do is take your foot and just kick the leg of the table and keep drinking your coffee and keep eating. But he'll feel this like, whoa, you know, or you can bang underneath it, but you have to do it in a way that he doesn't see you doing it. His back has to be to you or something. But the thing is, you can make a sudden noise, or just, you know, like drop something on the floor, like a book. That's a great one for stopping screaming, by the way. And then you enter the room, you know, like for a bird that's screaming. But anyway, because you want to enter when they're quiet. So what you want to do is just very gently, and not really getting into it. What people often forget, and I will tell you, everyone, even the best trainers and behaviorists on the planet, every one of us have rewarded bad behavior in our lives, you know, because it's your own bird. It's like, you know, Buffy, quiet down. I'll be there in a minute. You know, well, now you've rewarded him. You know, he's like, all right, next time I'll scream a little bit louder. And you know it. I mean, when you're saying it's just, but you're on the phone and it's something really important, you know, a doctor's appointment or your work. And it's one of those things. So everybody's had that moment. But, or you can even take, I've done this before, you take like you know, how you fold socks, you know, and just have some of them next to you and just toss one so the bird goes, whoa, what was that? You know, and you don't toss it at the bird. You toss it though in his line of vision. So somewhere across the room, you know, whatever, as long as he's not a real panicky bird, because he wants to fly off and hurt himself. You don't want him to do that. But so that's the thing. I really don't like them, because if we do that again, the more he regurgitates, besides just the unsanitary part of it, the more he regurgitates, the more you're going to end up with those hormones rising.
Okay.
And we just want to do that. And then once breeding season's over, put toys in there, rotate them more, so that it's not always the same baby. So he has different, and as he gets rotation, then it's not going to be as appealing to feed everything.
Okay. And then our next question comes from Antonio, and they say, hello, how to reduce bad behaviors caused by the death of a partner or owner?
Oh my, depends on what the bad behaviors are. One of the things that we forget about in our own grief,
Mhm.
when we lose a member of our family, whether it's animal or human, I will tell you. One of the things we forget a lot of times, and especially when it's a human and there's so much involved that you have to have done legally, you know what I mean? If there's somebody, there's usually paperwork, things like, all these things is the last thing you want to do. You just want to grieve. And a lot of times, our dogs will snuggle up to us or whatever, cats will snuggle up to us, but the bird will kind of get short shrift on it. And we have to remember that they're part of the process and that they are grieving too. And they do grieve. And some of them grieve horribly. And the thing is that I encourage people to have the bird be part of the human grieving as well. So they, a lot of times they won't want to come out. They're not going to want to eat as much. They won't be playful because they're grieving. Now, if it was a sole owner and the bird and that owner were just the only two in the house, and this is another family member taking over, in that sort of situation, again, you're dealing with a creature that's a flock creature, and their primary flock member and their best friend that they hang out with in the flock is gone, and they're not coming back. And so I always encourage people to talk to the bird about it, tell them how sad we are about it, give them time to kind of come around and to feel more comfortable. If for some reason the people do not want to or cannot keep the bird, if the bird already knows them and they can do that, but if they can't, I always recommend that they try to find someone who's very similar in age and then gender. And the reason I say gender is that because I've known several birds that love blonde women, but they also like blonde gay guys that are friends of mine, they come visit. It's like they like that energy, that more feminine energy. And it's one of those things where, so you have to look at the whole picture, because a lot of times a bird, you'll think, well, no, it was a woman. But if you have a man who has a very gentle or more womanly way of moving, it's what I call womanly. I guess it's just women move at angles and men move at 90-degree angles, but women move at, more graceful angle. And it's something where you need to find something similar for that bird. Putting that bird in a household with 10,000 people and 40 more birds and everything else, a lot of times, sometimes it's the right thing for the bird. If it's a bird that was social, maybe beginning, this person adopted it, and now it's going somewhere else, and it might like that type of environment. But it's something you have to work with on a subjective basis. And definitely, though, you have to allow them time to grieve. You have to talk to them about it. Mention the person's name, everything else, and explain we're all sad and they're not going to come back, and I'm sad and I know you're sad. And it's just acknowledging that, because they can feel your grief. And they will understand that you're grieving together. It's different than just sort of dumping them off somewhere and saying, hey, I can't keep you, or whatever, because in that sort of situation, they're confused. But if they understand that everybody in the household is grieving for the same person, and it just takes time. It'll take several months on some birds. And it just is what it is. It's just like for us.
Yeah.
We don't get over it right away. I mean, it's just, we don't. And they don't either. And especially if that's that primary friend for sometimes decades.
Yeah.
You know?
So go gentle on them.
Yeah, and be very compassionate.
Yeah. Okay. And so then Nicole says that I have a 1-year-old female cockatiel who has learned to bite from seeing one of my older cockatiels, who has always been a biter. I have separated them a bit, but how do I stop her from this learned behavior of biting?
Okay. Probably what I would do is when I handled her, I would handle her away from the other bird. If the other cockatiel is seen as, especially if there's hormones going around, and if one's male and one's a female, and females have a tendency to be more bitey sometimes, a lot of times they're just a little more twitchy and not quite as, little boy cockatiels kind of swagger around and everything's great. And the little girls are kind of like, oh, I'm so sweet. No, I don't like that. I'm going to bite the daylights out of you. And, I mean, it's that sort of thing. And so that, what you have to sit back, this is where you kind of sit back and see how many other birds are in the environment. And then the little boy cockatiel, is he with the person, or is he where the person can see him and the bird can see him when they have the female on their hand? Because a lot of times they'll be triggered by the other birds looking at them. Like, oh, no, this isn't my best friend. You're my best friend. It's sort of like that thing. Honey, don't pay attention to that blonde, that gorgeous blonde, sitting next to me in the restaurant, that type of thing. It's that type of thing where you want to make sure that they understand that this is undesired behavior, and this is where like the earthquake comes in. Also, this is another thing of watching, listening with your eyes. As you handle the birds more, I would see if the bird bit more when it was out, or when she was out of the area where the other bird is, or if she's in the same area. I would then check and see if I covered the boy's cage while I was holding the girl, if she still bit me. I would see if she was fine when I had my back turned to the boy and was talking to her, and then I turn around and she bites. And these are all things because they all bite for different reasons. And so then for her, there's triggers a lot of times. And sometimes the trigger is like my 2 little dogs here, and sometimes they'll trot with me. I am not going to pick up my Yellowknife when the 2 dogs are around my feet. I have them go out of the room because I'm going to get bitten. And it's just one of those things that says, run away, let's leave. Or if there's a bird that's a potential mate there, it's like, well, no, this isn't my room. You're my best friend, because they're coming into that thing of especially if he does any courtship, or, the singing or whatever, if it's a little boy, the other one. So, but the little girls tend to be more nippy and everything. The other thing is when you have a biting bird, if you can handle them part of the time without them biting, it's much more important that you have repeated situations where you're not bitten. And the way that you do that in a situation like this, where if the bird, now if they're biting when they step on your hand, that's a whole different thing. But if they're biting just because they're on your hand and they bite, you want to see what maybe triggered that. Sometimes it's the gardener walking past. If you live in an apartment building, sometimes it's him with the mower or whatever, and you have a floor, a ground floor apartment. Or if it's if you have, you're facing a street, sometimes it's just cars going by or something, it just startles them. It makes them feel nervous. Sometimes they're biting you, say, I want to go back in my cage because I don't feel good about what's out here right now, or that frightens me. And so you experiment and see what happens. But then when you hold the bird, you pick her up. If there's a favorite treat she likes or whatever, I found cockatiels are not quite as treat motivated because they're more like a cockatoo in that they'd rather have that interaction. But the thing is that you can often just do something like this. So if let's say the bird's on your hand, I use my LaCroix water, and let's say the bird's on my hand, or I've got her on my finger, but let's say it's on my finger. And then if I could feel, what you have to do is listen with your whole body. You'll feel there's usually a little shift.
Mm-hmm.
There's that little, shift. That's when you get that earthquake, boop, like that, just boop, that much. Not, you don't throw them on the ground. You don't want them to fall. You just a little earthquake. Or you can take your other hand and go, whoop, and their head will go, whoa. And then you go, oh, I'm going to put you back in the cage. And the thing is that then they learn, okay, if you can hold them 20 times and not get bitten, it doesn't matter that you're not holding them for 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah.
What matters is the number of times you can hold them repetitiously, the number of times you can hold them without getting bitten. That's what you're going for.
And Chris, so cockatiels, they also, well, from my experience, when they're gonna bite, sometimes they do the hiss before they do the bite. So,
Yeah.
The hiss. So do you respect the hiss and let them be, or do you?
This is another thing of communicating with them and seeing what they're telling you with the hiss, because sometimes they're hissing because we've held them too long, or something startled them, or somebody came into the room, and it's all these different things. And that's why it's really important, we take creatures that in the wild would fly, oh my gosh, miles a day.
Yeah.
And what we do is we put them in, and they would be able to leave unless they were actually captured by something. They'd be able to leave a situation that made them feel nervous, or where they felt overwhelmed or whatever. And we put them in a situation where they can't leave.
Yeah.
And so that's why we have to watch them and see what are the things that triggers the behavior. Then we work on desensitizing the bird to that triggering factor. But you have to get yourself first where you can handle the bird. So then you can desensitize him without getting bitten part of the way down. Because if you're bitten even 1 out of 3 times, is way too many times. It's not going to make a difference, as opposed to 10 times without getting bitten. Putting him back in, you still haven't been bitten. Another 10 times later on, boom, not getting bitten. And then, I found that with people that have birds and have had them for a long time, and that work more like I do with the birds, where I look at the world from the bird's perspective, and I try to see what would trigger him if he were in the wild and he were at this level rather than up in a tree.
Mm-hmm.
What would trigger it? Something that could come in at him. I find that if you do that, it's really interesting because you'll get a really good insight into their world. And I've seen situations where we've actually maybe had to move a cage or partially cover a cage or whatever to make the bird not get quite so much stimulus in the beginning. And then we desensitize them to it by uncovering a little more, a little more, a little more at intervals as the bird is comfortable. So these are all the things that we look at. It isn't just stopping biting behavior. It's like what triggers it. And so we have to be part of that as well. But if you, for that moment, they're doing that hiss, if you do that hand thing, like I said, if this is a bird, you do that hand thing.
Yeah.
Or that little bit of an earthquake, enough to go, oh, really, don't go back, put them in and tell them they were good babies. And you praise them because they didn't bite you. Do you see? Even though you didn't allow it to happen, you say, oh, you're so good. You were such a good boy. And you give them a little goodie and they're going, okay. And what you'll find is you'll start to speak their language, and you'll be holding the bird and you'll feel that shift, and then you go, oops, okay, and then you put them back, that type of thing. So you'll start to say, oh, you know what, he shifts. It's a little, they have what gamblers, I think, call a tell. It's a tell where you can, you see, you go, okay, that guy's got aces or that guy's got nothing, because there's some little thing they do with their eyes or whatever. But it's birds, not just looking at their faces, because, cockatiels, they don't have pupils like the Amazons do, where they're like so expressive,
Yeah.
talk about a tell. But it's that type of thing where you want to have it be that way, where the bird understands, oh, I can be taken out. I don't have to bite them to make them take me back.
Okay. Well, we have another cockatiel question for you. This one is from SG. They say, I have a much loved 24-year-old cockatiel who has some health issues right now. He is stable, but my equally loved Senegal is very jealous of the extra attention he is getting. She has always been jealous of him to the point of wanting to attack him, but it is even worse right now because of the extra attention my teal is getting. She is a rescue who was badly neglected before I got her over 20 years ago, and I'm sure that does not help. So you've got looks like a rescue Senegal that they've had that's in the 20s as well, and then the 24-year-old cockatiel is having some health issues. So
okay, well,
how do you deal with the parrot jealousy, like flock jealousy and age?
No, Senegals, it's again, they're for a little bird, they're a high-powered bird. I call all those little high, either a big bird in a little bird suit or, a firecracker bird, and they react to everything. Senegals are great anyway. I think they're fun because they're always kind of up to no good. It's like really cute. They're kind of 0 to 100 miles an hour in a short clip. What I would start doing is I would set aside a particular, probably, let me think. I would set aside either a couple of times a day where they would just have the Senegal out with them. And it doesn't even have to be that focused. It can be, let's say you're making a salad for dinner or something like that, something you don't have the stove on and but it's where just something where they can be out with you. It's interesting when you can give a bird, and there's no way to get rid of the Senegal's jealousy at this point. But the thing is give the Senegal repeated small times out with you. Because if, again, sort of like the biting thing, but just of turning it around, the reason for that would be then so that the Senegal comes out with the person more than the cockatiel comes out, even though they might have for a longer period. Mm-hmm. Then when I was holding the cockatiel, let's say that the Senegal's name was Sammy and the cockatiel's name is Ricky. And I'd say, Ricky, we have to take care of you, because you've not been feeling well. Sammy, I'm so glad you're here. Sammy's really good. He helps defend everybody, whatever. You talk about Sammy and what a good boy he is. I loved this. Oh my God. When I go into homes, I had the best time going into people's homes because I got to hug all these baby birds and birds that people thought were awful. And they were really wonderful. They just the people just didn't understand, So anyway, what was the story? God, about 10,000 stories. I'm thinking, what was the one in particular I was going to tell you? What was I just talking about? The Senegal parrot. Yeah. It was I'm getting old. Oh my God. No. Oh, which one was it? Oh, yeah. Where these people had an Amazon that was biting everybody. He was like, he was diplomatic about it. I'm going to bite everyone. And so it was so funny because I went into the house and I was taking notes, but I had them keep the bird in the cage. And I sat next to the cage. And then the owners had chairs that were kind of opposite the cage anyway. And that's how they kind of had him. And so I also was taking notes. I'm writing notes. And let's say, I don't remember the bird's name. Let's say it's Bobby. And I'd be writing notes, and these people were like, you know, on the Amazon. And I'd say, oh, Bobby, you're such a pretty boy. And then I'd be like, and Bobby, you're such a good boy. And I remember the first time I told him he was a good boy, he had this look of confusion on his face, because here he is displaying, doing all this stuff. I'm going to come out, I'm going to kill you. And I say, you're such a good boy. And he was like, is that a possibility? I mean, it was, you know, it was like, what the heck? You know, I mean, what are you talking about? Good boy, I'm a bad boy, you know? And a lot of Amazon say, I'm a bad boy, you know, I mean, it's like an Amazon thing. But it was just so funny, because I'd never seen a bird look so flummoxed, you know? I mean, it was just like, what? And, you know, I said, you're a good boy. And he's like, what the heck's wrong with you? But it stopped him for a moment. And it shows you kind of how habitually we get into things, you know, like saying, oh, stop that, you're a bad boy, don't do that, whatever. What you do when you have a bird that wants to bite all the time too, is that you compliment the bird that's biting when they're behaving. Now, they don't have to do anything other than not bite you. So that means if the Senegal is just sitting there breathing and pooping while she's working on the cockatiel, or while he or she is working on the cockatiel, if the Senegal is just sitting there not displaying, just breathing or pooping, you just say, oh, you're such a good boy, you know, I love you. And your cockatiel, you're so lucky to have him as your brother, you know, or sister, or whatever. You know what I mean? And what happens is they understand that you're praising them, and you're looking at them. You have to look at birds, because birds, when they talk to each other, they look at each other. And so that's what you want to do, is really be focused. Look, even when you're handling the cockatiel, and then you have the Senegal in the cage, so there's no, you know, coming out and attacking. But you just say, oh, you're such a good boy, you're so sweet, when he's not doing any display behavior. And you keep looking at him. I've done this with small children, where people say, oh, no, God, he's just going to get bored in 2 seconds, you know, and I used to have to keep the kids quiet a lot of times when I was working with the birds. I mean, I certainly wanted to see how the house was going. But a lot of times what I do is I would just, while I was taking the notes, I'd smile at the kid, you know, like a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, and I'd smile, oh, is that your truck? You like that truck? Oh, it's a beautiful truck. And then I would talk to the people. And then and I'd just smile at the child from time to time, and then I would keep writing. And then, oh, you can, like, you're big, yeah, you know, you're a big boy. My goodness, you're so smart. It was, I mean, people would be like, can you come like live with us for a while, you know, because I know their dogs behaving and their birds and their kids, and you know, it was fun. But so with the Senegal, if he gets scolded all the time, he's got your undivided attention. What do we do when we scold somebody? We don't just look over there and scold someone. But well, I guess sometimes people do. But when we're very focused, and all the Senegal wants is more of the attention. So that you can still be hugging the cockatiel and saying, I'm sorry, you're sick, you know, and then telling the Senegal, I love you, you're so pretty, you're so smart, you know, I just love you, you're such a good boy. And then if he makes like a lunging motion in the cage, you just turn away from him. You just turn your, so he doesn't see your eyes. All you have to do is turn your head. You hung up the phone. You know, you hung up the telephone. And then you go back and look, and if he's being nice, you say, you're such a good boy. And you know, and so you're holding the cockatiel who's not doing anything bad. And then to bring that Senegal out more frequently for shorter periods. But it will say, oh, well, I was just out, you know, 15 minutes ago, or a half an hour ago, or whatever. For short periods, save some treats, like Senegal size, I'd say like half a grape, or, you know, that type of thing, just, or a blueberry, or, you know, if you don't mind blue poops. But the thing is that if he knows that he's going to get little things, boom, 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 of your attention, even if it's just handing him something and saying, you're such a good boy, you know, when you want to praise him and look at him when he's not exhibiting aggressive behavior. He exhibits you, you just turn away. and you might still have the cockatiel here, but you just turn away.
Mhm.
And then you come back, and you don't have to turn away for an hour. I mean, literally 5 seconds, you know, because Senegals have they're what I've found with hyperbirds. Anybody who has a hyperbird, like a Senegal or a Caïque or some of the conures, especially the smaller ones, if you have a hyperbird like that, they really respond well to these little tiny short periods rather than trying to make them do something for a long time. They have too much energy for that. So I would just take out the Senegal more frequently for shorter periods. And while he was out with me, I would praise him. While I was working with the cockatiel, you might even, you know, think about taking the cockatiel in another room and working with him, but that might be worse for the Senegal. So if it were me, I would start out with it, just telling the Senegal what a good boy he is, and even dropping in, let's say in his food dish, a blueberry or something that he likes, you know, or a little piece of nut, tiny little pieces. You don't want to give him huge things because you want to be able to reward over and over and over again, but something he really covets, you know. And so by doing that, he says, okay, well, if I just sit here and I'm patient, then I'm getting all this attention. I'm getting the eyes looking directly at me when I'm good.
Mhm.
But when I'm misbehaving, I'm not getting it. If you bring him out while the cockatiel is out with you, all bets are off. You know, you become hamburger. I mean, it just, so this is where, you know, caging the one, not the other one, and then small repetitive times coming out, even if it's just for 5 minutes with the Senegal, and then putting a treat in his mouth before you put him back in the cage.
The reward there.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, let's see. Oh, so I'm going to announce our winner for today. This is for our giveaway of the tropical fruit pellets, as well as a bag of your birds, a bag of food of your bird's choice. So you get two bags of great Lafeber food. And the winner for today is Freddie C. So congratulations, Freddie.
Congratulations.
Hopefully I hope that makes you and your bird's weekend. It would make my weekend if I won if I won that. So congratulations. The Lafeber office will reach out to you, I believe, starting early next week to send that out to you. And Chris, wait, before I get to my question for you, a reminder for you is I just want to let everyone know that we have a Where Do Baby Birds Come From? A Veterinary View of Avian Reproduction is next Friday with Dr. Stephanie Lamb. That'll be at 11:30 California time, so Pacific Standard Time. I'm not sure. So a little half hour earlier than today's webinar. And then after that, we're going to have the Gray Parrot Anatomy Project. And that's going to be an update and the relevance to all parrot species. And that's by Dr. Scott Eccles. So those are the 2 upcoming webinars. So Chris, we had something about an exercise for people to send people off with.
Yeah, I thought it would be fun to give people an exercise to try on their birds and just see how the bird progresses throughout the next month. What I'd like to see is and I don't care how large or how small the bird is, but just when you're talking to them, take time to stop and pay attention to them and talk to them and start using this for yes and then no for no, and listen to syllables, because a lot of times you'll hear like with Jezebel, you know, that was I love you. I mean, and she just was trying so hard, and she was so excited, you know, that red face got redder, and she was just like so excited and jumped when I said, I love you too, Jezebel. And it was like she was trying so hard to communicate. And so start watching body language. Like I said, sometimes the Amazons, even the adults and the macaws, they'll flip the wing fast when they're happy. Watch your bird's body language and start listening and talk to them. And even when you're giving them your food, I'm going to put your food in your dish now. Here's your food. Oh, I've got some banana here, or grapes, or whatever, you know, green beans that we use, peas in the pod, you know, that type of thing. And just say, I've got peas in the pod for you. Do you like that? And see what they look like, your bird looks like when he sees those things he really likes. And you might notice that the yes is just the pupil's doing just a real quick something, or maybe he has a little poop like that. And that might be his, I like that. Do you see?
Great. Yes.
And so see if they can discover something new about their birds, even if they've had it for like 20 years, just by talking to them and saying, I love you. Let's, talk. Do you like this? And start using the yes and no. See what happens. I'm curious.
Yeah. So now that you said that, I was just thinking, so when people go and try that with your bird, and I would love to read off some of, next time we have our heart to heart, to read off people's, what they experienced since from now until the next webinar. So if you, let's say if you email, I guess you can email customer service at lafeber.com, and just put in the subject line, maybe like heart to heart webinar exercise results, because that would be great to share, right? Just send us a quick, like a sentence on what changes you saw in your bird. I'd love to read them off while we wait for people to log on next webinar.
Yeah, no, it would be fun, and they'll be subtle, because this isn't like target training, anything else where you're using reward like that. The reward is just talking. Now the birds, let's see, are they getting more, like, instead of screaming as much, are they more vocal? Are they more affectionate now that you're actually just looking at them like another bird and talking to them more intently? And then is anybody, getting yes? And it might just be like you hardly see it. They might just do like, boom, that much.
Yeah.
But that's what a lot of birds, if you notice that and go, yes, you like that, yes. Once you can get them to do two different things, respond to two different words like yes and no, let's say, the gates open, because from there you can start playing 20 questions with them about you want to come out, you want to get this, whatever, and you will start to understand the language of your particular bird.
Nice. All right, there you go, everyone. You got your homework for the cut out for you until for our next webinar. I'd love to read those off, see what people notice. So thank you, Chris. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on. I mean, it's just the insight is precious and unique, and you can't get anywhere else. So thank you for your time.
Well, and I want to thank everybody. I really appreciate all of you that take time out to join us in the webinars, and I treasure it. And I thank you all very, very much. And have a great St. Patrick's Day.
I know, it's coming up. A lot of birds are already wearing their green, so they're already ready. So. All right. So on that note, till next time, everyone have a great weekend. Stay safe, and all the best to you and your flock. And bye, Chris. Thank you so much.
Bye, Laura. Thank you.
Bye.